We've been trained since kindergarten in our government schools to regard the media as authoritative and as, hardworking people fighting for the little guy and trying to present the truth. Yet we see many, many examples of the little guy. Nicholas Sandmann is a very obvious example. Those cadets who were playing the circle game. Here's an easy example. The guy who photoshopped CNN into that GIF with Trump wrestling them, CNN said, "We reserve the right to sue you."
Yeah,
that's not
to hunt him down and destroy him for creating a meme. Yeah.
That's not looking out for the little guy. That's looking out for number one.
Joining me is a columnist, a media personality, and the author of Dear Reader, the unauthorized autobiography of Kim Jong-il, Michael Malice. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Hello.
Kim Jong-il, and yet when you see that online, sometimes it looks like Kim Jong-2.
That's
because
true.
Of the IL. That must be very confusing to people.
Only if they're like, IQ of 100 or lower, I guess.
I said to you right before we started, I was doing a little research, and then people see Kim Jong-un, the current one, then you got you got il, people think it's a 2. You could see why there'd be some language confusion there, I think.
Well, it's also funny when people think Kim is his first name, because that's the family name, and in Asia they have the last name first, and some people refer to him as like Little Kim. It's like, that's not it.
Yeah. You could Google Lil Kim, and a whole other thing comes up. Very entertaining, by the way.
When I started this North Korea work, it was driving me crazy that there's so many people on TV and in other forms of media who are running their mouths about this country, which is extremely complicated, and they have no idea what they're talking about. And, quoting Atlas Shrugged, I said, I'm going to put a stop to this once and for all. And I kind of did. The conversation has started shifting from, we just need to bomb them into oblivion to this is a nation of, 25 million slaves. And our hearts should go out to them because they are absolute victims of this horrible regime. I was on an NPR affiliate, it was very funny, and she was referred to Kim Jong-il as a campy figure, and I said, well, that's a very unfortunate choice of words, and she was rendered pretty much suicidal because, again, they have concentration camps, you can see them on Google Earth. So whenever you see the press making North Korea out to be a carnival, this is exactly what I'm against.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the things that I really want to dive into in a little bit, because I find it to be one of those things where anything happens, there's a missile test, as now seems to be happening every week or whatever else. The amount of people, and again, you can't pay too much attention to what's happening on Twitter, but just the amount of misinformation, confusion, joking about extremely serious things when people have no idea what the consequences are, all that. There's just a whole series of
I was on a radio show this week, and the hosts were just cracking jokes about North Korea, and I wasn't having it, and he's like, oh, you got to let me have my jokes. I go, it's like North Korean missiles, you got to make sure that they land. The book is humorous because I'm like, if you can make people laugh about this situation, you can get them to understand the darkness, because otherwise it's too intense. There's this amazing book called Nothing to Envy, and you read it and you want to jump out of a window because we're so powerless to help these people. But at the same time, I think it's important to understand both North Korea specifically and generally how, totalitarian governments work and what that means in practice. I was born in the Soviet Union, so this is something that hits very close to home for me.
You flew from New York to China?
Yeah.
And then a flight?
To Pyongyang, It's in the last terminal. It's one flight a day, all the way tucked away in the Beijing airport.
And even though it's illegal to go now, when you went, how many years ago was this?
2012.
Okay, so not that long ago, 5 years ago. Who was going there? Like when you were on the plane, what type of people were even going?
It was very international, my tour group. There were a bunch of Canadians. There was a guy from Belgium, I believe, a girl from Holland. A lot of Europeans, a couple of people from Ireland. I think this is the kind of people who are like, there's nothing else like this on Earth, and let's see it, for what it is, and as opposed to what you're hearing in the press.
Yeah, and when you get there, what are the security measures? Because obviously they don't take too kindly to outsiders, especially people that, may want to talk about what's going on.
Well, quite the opposite. When you're there, you're a guest of the government. So you are treated extremely well. It was safer there than here because no one can do anything to you because human life means nothing. And you're there as a resource for the state. So you are treated very well. But when you land, at least for me, your whole brain is screaming at you like you don't belong here. Mm-hmm. It's this very kind of feeling that's almost impossible to describe.
Yeah. So tell me about your time there.
I mean, I could go. I wrote an article for Reason.com for Reason about it. You could look it up. But it's, my whole principle there was to try to break down my guide. I do a lot of ghostwriting, and when I do that, I interview the people and kind of get inside their head, get past the press releases. And I'm like, I'm going to use those techniques in my guide to get her to kind of let me know what she knows. And there was this funny moment how they're very quick. I mean, this is what people don't get. The North Koreans have a sense of humor. They're humans in jail. And they have something there called Cholima, which is a Pegasus, which is the symbol of speed. And I asked my guide, I go, if I could send you anything from the outside world, what do you want me to send you? And she goes, a Porsche. And I go, lady, I'm not sending you a Porsche, and I'm not sending you Cholima either. And she goes, we have the original one here. What do I need you to send it to me for? So very, very quick and very, very funny.
Yeah.
And she said she wanted perfume. And I go, what kind of perfume? And she was struggling for the words. And imagine how, it's hard for us to describe perfume. Scent is not something that lends itself to language. And the word she was looking for is feminine. And this is someone who's a millionaire.
Interesting.
And she can't buy perfume because they don't have it in the whole country. And I smuggled the perfume in for her. But it's when I was telling her, she had the same haircut my mom had in like 1981. My mom has jet black straight hair. And I said, you know, talking to you makes me realize a lot of what my mom went through back in Russia. And she just stares at me. She goes, oh, then your mother must have hated Russia. And it was this very chilling moment. And someone...
And yet this is a woman who obviously has a pretty decent job.
Very
and
rich.
Was she a millionaire because of the job, the tour guide job?
So North Korea has something called Sangbun, which is a hierarchy based on your loyalty to the regime. So to even step foot in Pyongyang, your family has to have a good background, right? So to be talking to foreigners, you have to be off the charts in terms of your family background. And one of the people, you know, stayed behind on the tour. He did solo for a few days. And she told him all she wants to do is travel the world. And, you know, your job is to show tourists around, and you see college kids, you know, and you get to see, like on my tour, America, Canada, Ireland, you know, Belgium, and you know you're never going to be able to go, ever, no matter how much money you have, no matter how much power you have. In fact, anyone who's a diplomat or something like that who leaves North Korea for any reason, their family has to stay behind as hostages to make sure you don't defect.
Yeah, I mean, what a crazy proposition.
It's not crazy, it's brilliant. I mean, the level of control, this was, as I lay out in my book, this was a methodical, that this family got this complete country under their total control. It was step by step, closing the doors, putting up barriers, hermetically sealing them off from the outside world.
Yeah, I guess I say crazy in that it's like the crazy level of authoritarianism.
Oh,
you say brilliant as in not because you like it per se,
of course.
but because the mechanism that they use to create this power is pretty brilliant.
Oh yeah, and it's so pervasive, and it's so much worse than people think. Like, oh, they just have these crazy ideas about the leaders. It's much worse than that. It's so much worse than people realize.
Yeah, so I want to get to some of that, obviously, but for your tour guide, because this is sort of fascinating to me. So this is a millionaire. What does that even mean in North Korea? If you can't get perfume, you know, what does that mean to be a millionaire?
What that means, and this is to me the beginning of the end of the North Korean regime, it means you can bribe your way out of trouble. So one of the first things I saw when I landed at the airport, I was looking at the parking lot in the back, and when the guards stopped, like some rich lady, and by rich in North Korea, she's dressed in like 80s clothes, right? And she's on her cell. And he's basically like, papers, please. And she rolled her eyes at him, didn't even look at him, showed him whatever he needed to, and he waved her off. And as the regime has stopped being able to provide for its citizenry, the corruption has spread throughout the country, which is a great step to bringing down a country which is based on glorifying the government, right? So now when you're wealthy, you can just pay whoever you want to get whatever you want. And that is a good step towards getting people in North Korea to realize this is all a house of cards.
Yeah, what a fascinating way to look at things. It's like now the corruption and bribery is the good part.
Yeah.
Because this means that the power is starting to erode.
Right.
They can't control this anymore.
And the best argument towards the earnestness of their propaganda, that the Kim family are divine essentially, is this cynicism. And just like here, realizing what we're being presented to as the overwhelming truth is actually a barely, poorly constructed lie.
And I feel like the mistakes of Iraq, and nobody knows why the hell we're in Afghanistan still. Trump is not beating war drums. You know, there's stuff about, there's always this over-the-top rhetoric related to Iran. But I don't sense this is a guy that wants to just, I think he's actually very against all of these nation building.
The bloodlust of the establishment, which I include the corporate press, cannot be overstated. When 2016, Trump's the nominee, we heard it every single day. He's crazy, he's going to give us to World War III, he's going to get pissed off at a tweet from China and press the nuclear button. Remember, we heard this all the time. Carly Fiorina got asked this in the second debate, the first question, do you trust President Trump with his finger on the nuclear button? And now, China has hacked our systems, Russia has tried to interfere with our elections, and the press is constantly saying, do something about it, do something about it, do something about it, do something about Venezuela. So the fact that he's not getting us into World War III is now being used as a slight against him by the same people who regarded that as a problem when he was a nominee. It's horrific, and this has been a long time coming. Since we talk about yellow journalism in high school. Remember the Spanish-American War, and then they pretend it went away. It didn't go away. The same press wants, if it bleeds, it leads. They can't wait to get us into another engagement. It's disgraceful.
What has to happen with the press then? And I mean this in terms of cable news, mainstream news, network news. I mean this Vox, HuffPo.
Sure. The battle is
BuzzFeed, all of it.
The battle is won when the average corporate journalist is regarded with the exact same way as the average tobacco executive. They have a job, they're promoting their product is cancerous and deadly, they're often bright people, they're often good people, but be aware of what it is that they're selling you.
So how do we find some people to trust in the mix of all this, in this big mess?
Trust but verify. I mean, I'll use the Reagan. I mean, I'm not interested in trusting people. I'm interested in trusting ideas and creating mechanisms that people can't enforce their will, so trust won't be necessary. Like, I don't need to trust, like eBay, right? I don't need to trust that other guy is going to be honorable because they're different systems. I can get my money refunded, so on and so forth. So there's no reason for me to have a political leader to trust because systemically he's going to betray me at some point or another.
God, there's a lot here, Malice.
Thank you.
I didn't see you until 2 minutes ago. You walked in here wearing this gorgeous little thing.
Yeah, I've been known for this look for years.
Is that right?
All of a sudden, I get phone calls. Who's this woman, Tulsi, who's been dressing like you? She's so nuts. She even put a streak in her hair to pass as me even more. And I looked this up. She says she's from this state called Hawaii.
Yes.
I never heard this. There's a bunch of volcanoes in the middle of the Atlantic, and we're supposed to believe that this is a state. They live on volcanoes, rain of liquid metal, that they check the weather, and this is people. This is how they gerrymander the Electoral College. And now they're trying to say Guam's a state. Guam. I asked my friend, where's Guam? Find to me on the map. He points to this little island by the booth. That's Sicily.
You saying Guam?
Guam.
Guam?
Have you ever found... They're making up words and making them states. This is how the fake news media gets over it. Anyway, getting back to her campaign, I think she's great.
Yes.
I've been following her very closely, and I think it's reprehensible what's being done to people like Tulsi Gabbard, the congresswoman from so-called Hawaii, and all the other Democratic outliers. This is a wonderful change in our politics where so many people are realizing the nature of the enemy.
Something that happened to me about a year ago, a good friend of mine who I grew up with, I went to college with, we both studied political science together, we've been friends for our whole lives, 40 some odd years. He's a huge lefty now, obviously we diverged politically, but we went out for a drink and we sort of got into it, and he was getting very heated, and I just kept trying to get out of politics. I tried, and I'm sure you've been in a million of these, where you try to let it go, and there's something that's beyond politics, and I was trying to talk about his kids and everything else going on. And we couldn't get there, and I finally said to him, I said, do you think that I believe what I believe as much as you believe what you believe?
Ooh, great question.
And without pausing, with no hesitation, he said no. And I thought, and then this is a really rare moment for me. It then really escalated, and I've never done this before. I swear to you, I've never done this before.
Dave Rubin has never done this before.
I threw money down. I paid for the whole thing, the whole tab right there, and I walked out. I've never done anything like that before, and it's so counter to everything you know about me. But I thought that moment right there, like, you have to sit in that now. Like, I'm not attacking your motives, but you actually believe that I can't believe what I purport to believe.
What's amazing is there is a continuum, and there's lots of people who would blurt that out, and as soon as they heard themselves say it, they'd be like, whoa, oh, okay, I've gone down the wrong path. But the thing is, they've been so trained, especially the last few years. If you ask one of these types, is it possible that Trump is just crappy, mediocre, William McKinley, is that okay with you? And they're not going to really have an answer, because it's very important that he is the worst president who's ever lived, although there's very few metrics where you can make that argument. How
concerned are you that at the social media level and at the big tech level, that the game has been so rigged and manipulated already that we have no idea what's going on? I keep mentioning this thing about shadow banning is now in Twitter's terms of service. Okay. They can literally throttle accounts. We've known that they've been doing it forever, but now they're telling us they're doing it as of January 1st, and we all just keep playing the game as if the game is
not being rigged.
But the game is always going to be rigged. I mean, when you have your enemies, to expect them to play fair is extremely naive. This is my Soviet mindset talking.
Yeah.
We did have a president who tweeted his way into the White House, and I think what people don't appreciate is the existential angst it causes someone who works at a social media company to see their product or their program being, from their perspective, subverted by those who they despise to further their agenda. This must cause them a lot of grief.
But doesn't it also cause them to, tighten those spigots and make sure that as we get closer to the election, that Michael Malice isn't going to be heard as much, or Trump's not going to be heard as much, or Rubin or anybody else? I mean,
sure. I mean, the thing
but
is,
we all pretend that that's not really it. Like, that would be the thing that we would all be relentlessly talking about, right? If we really were trying to change something here?
I think they are losing tools in their toolbox. And I think, Kamala Harris, was calling for Trump to be banned from Twitter. Remember this?
Yeah.
And she got pushed back even from the left. And when she lost her campaign, I did a ham tasting on my live stream, and we tried, different kinds of hams from all over the world because the pig was finally roasted. So I think they are going to try different tactics, but because they're being called out on their tactics instead of being called out on the issues, this is why they are freaking out. It used to be, they would say, Dave Rubin's a racist. And you would spend months being like, no, I'm not, no, I'm not. Now it's Dave Rubin saying, look at their technique of calling me, Rogan, everybody else a racist as a means of preemptively dismissing them. So by you calling out their technique, it loses almost all its efficacy.
It's funny because like 3 years ago, let's say, when Daily Beast or Mother Jones or any of these awful things, what do you call it? You call them jihadists?
Jihadis without the testosterone,
Yeah.
yes.
Whenever they were doing that and they would call me all these things, I'd fight back, and then, I could occasionally get them to change one line or whatever, but then they wouldn't actually retweet the thing. They would just change it and nobody's seen it and whatever. It's out
Stealth
there
edit.
it's out there for then, right, stealth edit, so then Wikipedia can grab from it and the rest of it. But it used to really upset me, obviously, when I first, like anyone that starts getting that heat, it's hot at first. And in a weird way now, because I have a book coming out in April and I know what that is going to cause that microscope to look at me, or really fine tune on me, is that I'm glad that I went through it now.
Yeah.
Do you find that too, that you've been through a lot of the hits on this stuff, and it's like that actually makes you stronger now?
Oh, and especially it makes my audience stronger because they love it because it's like a greatest hits album, right? So it's xenophobic, racist, homophobic, blah blah blah. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm an immigrant. You know what I mean? So when they when I went after George Soros.
Oh, could you talk about this? Because this is exactly why I think you're such a great thinker, truly, what this whole Soros thing.
Oh, it was beautiful.
Yeah.
So some guy from The Atlantic, and I'm not trying to be dismissive, I genuinely don't remember his name.
The Atlantic's pretty terrible these days.
They've been terrible since Woodrow Wilson. Even before, The Nation. These people were the ones agitating for World War I. You have to go back. So Rudy Giuliani made a comment that he's more Jewish than George Soros. Now, in any other context, if you were talking to Jewish people and said, someone can be culturally Jewish without actually having Jewish ethnicity, as opposed to someone could have Jewish ethnicity and basically be a total goy, right? This is not controversial. This is very well known.
And everyone knows this. Obama kept saying he was the first Jewish president.
Yes, this is very known.
Yeah.
We were both Jewish. We know people who are super Jewish, and then people who are basically WASP, and then people who are adopted Jews, basically, who like the culture. And the guy from The Atlantic was like, oh, in the world of Trump, someone can be less Jewish than somebody else. And he's saying this about a literal Holocaust survivor, right? Referring to Soros.
Yeah.
But what was amazing is, in the same way it's Dave Rubin, secret Klansman and homophobe, it's George Soros, literal Holocaust survivor. Now, I always say the corporate press is factual but not truthful. It is factual that George Soros survived the Holocaust. He was Jewish. He was in Hungary, I believe.
Yeah.
He was under Nazi occupation. His life was in danger. However, and in any other context, people would not even argue. The experience of Jews who fled Germany and got to America is not the same as the experience of Jews who survived occupied territory, is not the same as a Jew who escaped the camps or survived the camps.
Mm-hmm.
They're all Holocaust survivors. These are separate things. But by using that term, they're trying to say George Soros, multinational billionaire, is beyond criticism specifically because of the Holocaust. And they came at me, blah, 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 and I'm like, look, I was born in Ukraine. My family survived the Nazis and the commies. I went to yeshiva. I've been circumcised 3 times. You're not going to out-Jew me.
That's pretty excessive.
So some guy came at me and he's like, oh, my grandfather died in the Holocaust. Family history doesn't matter. Sometimes you could just be a jerk. And I paused. This is one of the few times I paused before I tweeted. I go, I was wondering who died and made you an insufferable prick, but now I guess we know. Because you are not going to wave your grandfather's ashes at me to win some Twitter beef to defend George Soros. And I said to the Atlanta guy, I said, if you want to make George Soros out to be some sort of modern day Anne Frank, I can't stop you. But this is what they do all the time. It was really funny, especially Kamala Harris is a great example, because they couldn't figure out a criticism of her was racist or sexist.
Right.
So whatever there's only like 10 words to use, and once you say, I'm not even having this argument with you, they have no power.
What is the corporate press, really? Like, what is the psychological makeup of the corporate press that causes this whole thing?
Sure. So basically what you have are the universities, and that's where the evil starts. And we've been trained since kindergarten in our government schools to regard the media as authoritative and as, hardworking people fighting for the little guy and trying to present the truth. Yet we see many, many examples of the little guy. Nicholas Sandmann is a very obvious example. Those cadets who were playing the circle game. Here's an easy example. The guy who photoshopped CNN into that GIF with Trump wrestling them, CNN said, we reserve the right to sue you.
Yeah,
that's not
to hunt him down and destroy him for creating a meme. Yeah.
That's not looking out for the little guy. That's looking out for number one.
I've asked a bunch of guests this, but do you think there's a moment where something changed? Because it wasn't always this horrible.
It was.
Now, I get it's being exposed now more because we can all immediately tweet out the truth the second they pump out the lie. But do you think there was some other seminal moment somewhere along the road?
It was always this horrible, and this is what conservatives don't appreciate. We all learned in high school about William Randolph Hearst, the Spanish-American War, Remember the Maine, and yellow journalism. And then they just kind of the record scratch, and now we're into today. I have a big thread on Twitter. Walter Duranty is the prime example. He was a New York Times man covering the Soviet Union. And while Stalin intentionally committed a genocide via starvation of Ukraine, the Holodomor, he was putting out dispatches all the time saying, there's no problem. If there is a problem, it is malevolent propaganda. He said the Russian people, it's a little tough, but they're tightening their belts. Tightening their belts is a very interesting idiom in this context. And what Stalin did to these people is, if you were a kulak, which meant landowner, but pretty soon meant anyone, if you had any food in your home, that was for the people. They ransacked your house and took it. And if you weren't starving, that's how they knew you were hiding food, and that's who they targeted. So they would beat people mercilessly. They would tear their houses upside down, kick them out in the streets, to starve. And there was another reporter who, and going to this area was forbidden by the Soviet government. There was a reporter who jumped off the train, went to a few villages, reported back what was happening, these horrors. And Duranty was like, he's just an anti-Soviet agitator. So this has been going on for a very long time. They've always been hardcore, I call them jihadis without the testosterone. They have been this is a very demented ideology that will do everything in its power to maintain its hold on power. And only now that they've been fact-checked in real time and called out on their tactics in real time are people realizing, oh, I'm just going to say one more point. It's not, I had this tweet yesterday, I said, it's not about the corruption, it's about the depravity. If it was just, hey, I'm hiring my brother and he's getting paid too much money to sit in his ass, no one would care.
Yeah, we know they do that, that's fine. We'd let that go. It's like zippity-dam.
Yeah. This is about Amy Rohrbach and Jeffrey Epstein. When you have a network that knows that someone is engaged in the sexual trade of children, and their concern is not getting an interview with Meghan Markle. And when this is exposed, instead of coming clean, it's let's target the person who revealed this footage and get them fired at the network which they went to.
Anyone with one flickering brain cell would know that opening is going to have some cost. So when these politicians and media people get up there and say, well, we can't open until there's no risk whatsoever because any risk would be too much risk. It's like, that's not reality. Those are nice words you've put together and you strung them into a sentence, which is pretty impressive, but this is not reality. And then you watch, Media Matters then clips it, and then Vox and HuffPo and all the usual suspects that you talk about all the time, they all get in on it. And that is why, although I don't directly quote you, what you refer to as the cathedral, we're watching the machine break down right now. And I think by and large, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I just got handed my ass handed to me just today, and I'm glad to admit it. Just like you were talking about Larry Elder, Trump had been accused of saying that he was speaking about white supremacists as very fine people. When in that literally the rest of the sentence he goes, "I'm specifically not speaking about white supremacists." I had thought that believe all women was a right-wing talking point. And I tweeted this. I said, they said believe women, which is something we should do. People do tend to tell the truth more often than they lie, and we should give people the benefit of the doubt so they feel comfortable telling their story. And I tweeted this out, and Molly Hemingway, within minutes, was like, no, 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 no. The hashtag literally was believe all women. And it wasn't, Twitter randos. This is people like Carolyn Maloney, who's a very powerful congresswoman from New York, and some others. And I was shocked to see how that just seems stupid because women are human beings. They're capable of lying. And now, like you said, on Joe Biden, the same people are just pivoting without a batting an eye. I've always argued that they've always been this bad. And now I'm starting to wonder if they've gotten worse. What are your thoughts on that?
See, that's so interesting. And that shows how we all look at things from our own perspective. And then it's why you need to talk to people, because you have to map your reality against theirs. So I've usually taken the counter, which is that they used to be better and that something about the internet and the ability for the rest of us to now expose them has just completely ripped their filter off, on top of the fact that you see all these, they say they're journalists, and then you see their pieces, what they're writing, but then if you look at everything else they're tweeting all day long, it's like it's very obvious what your political biases are. You guys don't even hide it. You know what I mean? You'll have New York Times in your byline, and you'll tweet some articles that lean a little lefty or whatever, but then everything else in your feed shows exactly what you are. So I've always believed that it had something to do with the internet and exposing the ideas, and that we can see unedited videotapes. Look, the what you just said there about the very fine people moment, Joe Biden literally launched his campaign with a video that quotes Trump saying very fine people, and Biden, the implication is that Trump is talking about white supremacists, which, as you said, is exactly the reverse of what he said. But there's a reason he does it, because he knows the media will cover for him. Right? So who tweets about it then? When it comes out, Scott Adams tried to unpack it. I retweeted it. You probably did something. A few of us that go, it's not even about liking Trump so much. It's like, it's just about what's reality here? But they all do it together. So Biden tweets it out, and he knows no media is going to call him on it, so he can just keep doing it. And I think perhaps, and because we're holding this video for a little bit as this Biden story is just breaking, maybe by the time we release this in about a week and a half, I think it's possible that the Biden one almost feels like it could collapse the whole system, because all of the Me Too people are exposed right now. They all said believe all women, and they're all supporting Biden. And it's like, now what is left? What do you people have left? That's the purpose of this chapter, that fake news is not just fake headlines, it's about manipulation.
One of the things I was curious about, as someone you came from the Young Turks and had a leftist background, you talk about this very often. When you are front page of the New York Times, and you and Ben Shapiro are, but I'm being serious, are like next to an article that's implying that you lead to Nazism, right? Or just even just a hatred of any kind, maybe not literal Nazism, haha, I'm Jewish, but like white supremacy and so on and so forth. You know that everyone you've grown up with, everyone you went to college with probably reads the New York Times, or a large percentage of them do. On a personal level, and some of them are just going to do, they're not going to care. I went to high school, Dave Rubin, they're going to see this, and they're going to put
didn't know he was a Nazi.
Yeah, and like what's happened to him? He's gone full Nazi. Is that something that affects you? Like, part of me feels like you don't want to answer this because you're giving them what they want, but is there part of you that's affected by this on a personal level?
Well, when I when you interviewed me for the book, which we'll link to below, because you asked me some of, I think, the most biting, pointed questions about all of this. There's the portion of the book where I talk about losing a ton of my hair, because when I first got hate, I was getting hate from the people that I thought were my friends. You know what I mean? I just started saying, hey, liberals, let's be a little bit better. Let's care about free speech. I mean, you can see all those old videos. It wasn't like I was saying anything hateful, and yet they were saying all these horrible things to me, and people who were invited to my wedding are now calling me a Nazi. And I literally lost about 40% of my hair, and I was spraying freaking hair on. People can watch that Why I Left the Left video. I am bloated and bags under my eyes, and I look freaking terrible, and I felt even worse than that. That being said, and this is partly the purpose of the book, I am glad that I went through it. I made it to the other side, and everyone that makes it to the other side, James Damore, Brett Weinstein, Lindsay Shepard, Ben Shapiro, the versions of it that you've gone through, everyone that gets through it, you're stronger after you did it. I haven't seen anyone totally destroyed. Now, that isn't to say people haven't lost their jobs. That isn't to say there aren't, people that aren't public people who have had all sorts of things. But your choice is either you step up against it and defend yourself. So like when I invited, what did I do when that New York Times piece came out? Literally, it had YouTube's leading people to the alt-right with my head was the biggest head right there above it in the New York Times. My dad has had a subscription to the New York Times for longer than I'm alive, something like 45 years. He had to go to the bagel place he goes to in Long Island every Sunday to have a friend walk up to him and say, oh, I didn't know your son Dave is a member of the alt-right. And then my dad has to call me and say, what are we talking about here? So it's not that they don't really affect me anymore in that I don't get stress over it because I think I've come to know it for what it is. It's sort of like, well, to quote, it's sort of like a red pill moment. Like it's scary at first when you make that choice, but then you get on the other side. And when you see reality for what it is, it's like, these people aren't going to destroy me. They're going to destroy themselves. And that's a little bit of what I want to impart on people. I want them to know either you will step up and it will suck for a while and all sorts of bad stuff will happen, but your choice is much worse because your choice is the frog in the boiling pot. Your choice is to never live a life that is yours. Your choice is to never say what you really think. I just refuse to live that way, and I know you're the same.
I am live in studio with my guest who is just outside. I have not seen him yet, but I have been told that he is wearing a tiny mask due to proper safety protocols related to COVID. Here he is, Michael Michael Malice. Welcome to the Rubin Report.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you again.
Can I feel your face?
Yes, feel my face. This is very exciting. I didn't know what you were going to be doing today. You told me you had something in store for me. It's good to see you.
I wish I could say the same, but I can't, honestly.
First off, I love the suit. The color is great. The shirt's nice. Tie. The whole shebang. Where did you get this little face getup? I know COVID's very serious, and you've been very serious about it.
You didn't even praise the shoes.
Your shoes. The whole thing is.
These are seal leather from the 70s.
Is that right?
Uh-huh.
When you could get seal leather.
That's right.
Yeah, that's very impressive.
Not like nowadays.
No, you can't get it. You have to get it on the black market now. I have a feeling we're going to do the entire interview this way.
Well, of course. We can't joke around.
No, this is serious.
Plague times.
Yeah.
I don't want to kill your grandma.
No, thank you. They're both dead.
Well, I don't want to kill her again.
Already, yeah.
I'm from New York, as you know. Many people know.
You're a Brooklyn guy.
I've lived there all my life. And now I'm at the point where I'm joined the chorus of, well, let me take a step back. As a New Yorker, you're always defending New York at its worst, right? When people attack it for being filthy, for being crowded, or for people being rude, all my life I've said, you just don't get it, you don't understand, or that's part of what makes New Yorkers tough, we can survive it, you can't. And only in the last year, with COVID and what Mayor de Blasio, Governor Cuomo have done, have I come around to, I was wrong, and these people are right. What they've done to New York City, the crown jewel of America, one of the great cities of all time, is unforgivable and unacceptable. And there's no possibility, in my opinion, of things getting better. And I'm curious.
Ever? You think they can never get better?
In the medium term. In the medium term. There's no mechanism for it to get better.
Yeah.
If I'm a young person and I want to make a store that sells like artisanal socks, cheeses, I'm a young restaurateur, I want to open up a cool new restaurant, why would I go into New York City now where every single regulation is against me, where I'm being told constantly, maybe not explicitly, but implicitly, we don't want you here, you're not welcome, New York is not open for business, and we're just going to shut you down at the drop of a hat. And I feel as if LA is kind of similar in that vein, that it's going to get worse. because there's no mechanism for it to get better. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, as you know, I think LA is an absolute disaster, and I've only been to New York once since, I can't believe I'm talking to you in this thing. This is really, you look good. This is actually the best you've looked, honestly.
Well,
this
of course,
is the
you
clearest.
have to see my hideous face.
No, I've only been to New York once since this whole thing happened. I was in Midtown Manhattan because I was doing the Gutfeld show at Fox, and it was scary. It felt like I Am Legend. There were no business people out. There were only people out walking alone with masks and hats, and it was kind of cold, so jackets, and everyone looks kind of shady, and there's cops and a lot of barricades and all that stuff, and it's like, how does this ever come back? And here, I mean, you know, the main, I don't want to say exactly where we are, but the main drag here, still a ton of boarded up stuff. There's, what mom and pop shop? Forget young people, you said young people. What person that had their business closed in the last year that is experienced, maybe even has a little money, could be like, yeah, let's do it again. Let's do it again so Newsom can shut us down next month when we have the climate lockdowns or COVID-2, or give me something better than that.
The only possibility of things getting better, I tweeted this this week, if Caitlyn Jenner runs on a campaign of hitting and running Governor Newsom, I think she would get elected in a landslide. But here's what people don't appreciate. They thought one day Detroit could never go anywhere. Not only was Detroit Motor City, the home of the automobile industry, the music coming out of Detroit still resonates decades later, still legendary decades later.
Yep.
Now Detroit is a bombed out shelter, of a hole in the ground of what it used to be. Hollywood, in my view, is running on fumes, on inertia of the golden age. You know, you go to LA, every pretty girl, every hunk from their hometown, as you did, comes to Los Angeles to make their name, to make their mark, and now the movie industry doesn't have that cachet. It's not like the place you have to be anymore, because thanks to the internet, there's so many more venues for young filmmakers, especially internationally, to, on a small budget, create and innovate something amazing. Parasite, you know, which came out of South Korea, won the Academy Award. There's such a hunger and it's not even a right or left wing thing. There's such a hunger for new voices, new creativity, but Hollywood and these media establishment entities are so corporate that whether you're reading a comic book or you're reading about the Middle Ages or you're reading about a documentary, the messaging, the culture, the punchlines are all going to be the same. So why would you come here where you can hang up your shingle and be a filmmaker and be as opposed to Hollywood, and you're going to have an edge that way?
Or we're going out to dinner after this. Are you going to be dressed like this?
Well, sure.
How you going to eat? How you going to eat?
Well, I mean, I'm on a cut. I'm going to be doing an underwear ad, so.
If you're looking for more honest and thoughtful conversations about politics instead of nonstop yelling, check out our politics playlist. And if you want to watch full interviews on a variety of topics, watch our full episode playlist, all right over here. And to get notified of all future videos, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell.